Okay, after 7 previous sessions to prepare for this, we're finally arriving at the first 6 Chinese characters of the book Dao De Jing. Okay, so the first 6 Chinese characters, they are 道可道, 非常道. Again, 道可道, 非常道. So what does that mean? First, it's all about the Dao, which is basically Taoism, Taoist, it's all Dao, right? This is the Chinese character the Japanese pronounce it as Do. All right, so Bushido or, Judo, Kendo. Why do I always bring up the Japanese? Well, this is, you know, uh, in the traditional way of Chinese teaching, you always, give the analogy. Hopefully, people could, better relate and nevertheless, eventually, hopefully, connect. So, what the Japanese appears to be for most Chinese today, and what's the whole Chinese? Well, if you don't know enough, you cannot differentiate, can you? Right? So that's one. And two, because the Japanese were they were the first one, translate a lot of this into English. So they were introducing a lot of it. So they introduced as Japanese, right? So you go to San Francisco today, the little Tokyo, they have a Japanese town, or Japan, they call it Japantown or something. You will find there's actually a Zenji there. Basically, they introduce as Japanese. Of course, if you're Chinese, you're like, wait, isn't that a Zen thing was Chinese? Well, but if you're Indian, you probably say, wait, that's not Chinese. That actually came from our land of India, right? So it's not about really which legal state. We're just trying to, get to the authentic part of it. So anyway, back to this 道可道非常道, right? So English translation of mine, again, I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different versions, but I don't like any of them. So here's my version that I offer. 道可道非常道. My translation would be, if it is going to be a universal rule or law, then you cannot really reduce it down to the specifics, because once you do, they are no longer the universal rules. This could be a little abstract for those of you probably never were exposed or came into contact with Chinese philosophies. So I will go a little, a little length to explain. I guess a better analogy, we'll start with the Japanese again, okay? So they call it Bushido. That's almost okay, but when they call Kendo or Judo, for Japanese, of course, no any alternative. That's the way it is, right? But for Chinese, I guess old school Chinese or Chinaman, not the contemporary Chinese today, the problem would lie in we don't typically, for Chinaman or old school Chinese, we don't use that word or the Chinese character we pronounce as Dao. The Japanese pronounce as Do. We don't use that word that easily because when it comes to the knowledge, okay, so let's say you go to school, you acquire, you accumulate the knowledge, in the school you acquire through the learning experiences in the classroom, but then once you're outside the classroom, you still accumulate, your lifetime. You try to acquire knowledge, right? So that knowledge, a lot of it is on the technical level, okay? So that in Chinese or the Chinese character, we actually a lot of time would put it on shu. Shu means the the techniques, right? So instead of saying, let's say Kindle, right? Kindle means the sword, Japanese sword, right? The Japanese sword. The uh, I guess the science of sword, because Dao or Do for Japanese, that's the character where we have, I guess, the fundamental difference. For them, anything, if it's a knowledge, that could be a Do. For us, that's only level one. Basically, that's technique level. For us, the next level is the science or the studies. Okay, and then above that, that's where Dao, or they say Do, that's where it is, right? So that's our major differences, and I will elaborate a little more why it is very significant here. So judo is basically wrestling. So it's, for Chinese, it would translate when you use the word Dao, judo, or they use Do in Japanese. When you use that word, that's basically that's a big deal. But for us Chinese, it's very difficult to put this word Dao over the very specific, such as wrestling, which is judo, or the sword, the Japanese sword thing. For us, Dao is way above, way abstract. Okay, so when you follow the certain rules that's at the technique level, such as the Kendo or Judo, right? Do you change the rule? Not really. You don't change too much because it's technique. If you change the technique, then you're lost. How are you going to do things, right? So that's the major difference when the Japanese imported this Chinese character, the kanji. They did not get the whole meaning on the philosophical level. They just basically took it and translated it. And that became the big difference between the Japanese and Chinese. So one word in Chinese called 武术, that's in English today people known as Kung Fu, which is kind of misleading. Kung Fu doesn't mean 武术, or martial art. Martial art is more precisely. Martial art, if you translate back into Chinese, is the martial technique. Shu, that's what it means. Okay. And then at the beginning, before the westernization, arrived in China, mathematics in the Chinese was called 算术. Okay, the calculation technique. If you have the literate direct translation, that's what it is. The calculation technique, math. Okay, we don't use the word Dao on such specific technical levels stuff, because basically you have to make the rules there and you have to follow the rules. You can't change the rules, because once you change, the whole thing will be lost, right? So this is at the technical level. This is the major difference between the Chinese and Japanese. In my opinion, this is not established, consensus, among either the Chinese or non-Chinese. I'm a Chinaman, so anyway, I'm taking the liberty here. This is what I think. That's the major difference. I would personally differentiate between the two, right? We have to understand this, otherwise you won't get to understand what is 道可道非常道, right? So above that, the techniques, right? So what do you have? You will have basically the study or the science. Basically, you're on the strategic level. Remember, that was the technical level. This is strategic level. Okay, at the strategic level, you are more on the the macro rather than the micro, right? So at that level, you're looking at the bigger pictures, and yet this is not Dao. Okay, this is what we Chinaman or old school Chinese would call 学, science or study of certain things, of those technical stuff. So at that level, let's say, I'm trying to give you example. Let's say first you learned at entry level how to play the ancient Chinese music instrument called qin. Okay, you learn how to do this, right? That's the technique you have to learn. You don't change anything, do you? Or the Chinese, ink brush painting. That's all kung fu. You just have to learn, okay? Don't try to bend the rules. You just follow. But then, at the next level, when it comes to the level, in the Chinese character, say 学. I don't know if the Japanese even have one Chinese character for that, but we call it 学. When you're at the 学 level, you're actually like, I guess, in a contemporary Chinese, or more precisely American, we would call it research fellow. Okay, you're at the level you actually start to do the academic papers, the research. You are bringing this thing up to a whole new level, right? So you can see, let's say, yeah, just use that, I guess, math, right? You have someone who's teaching math at the high school level. Of course, basically teach the kids, about how to do this and that. But when you are a research fellow at a major education institution, a research institution, you are starting to go into something deeper, right? That's not something the high school math teacher deal with every day, right? So that is the 学 level. Okay, the science or studies. This is like advanced study, not just some, basically pick up things. Oh, I know how to do this. No. But then above and beyond that, okay, let's see. There's something, okay. So let's say I am a musician, and you are, visual artist. So of course, we're in a totally different disciplines, right? So I have my artistic language to express, to convey, and you have yours. So mine's musical and yours is visual, right? So, but go all the way up, all the way out, okay? Guess what? They all reach to the same level and they become universal. So that's not musical. That's not visual art anymore. That's just basically art. So when it comes to the art, now that's of course cross, discipline study. That could still be that. But when you go one step further, and then you take in, let's say, cinema, you take in ballet, or whatever other contemporary dance or modern dance, or you take in, stage drama, and then you start to have all this artistic, discipline or scope kind of merging together. You try to find what is the universal rules applied across all the disciplines. Now that becomes very close to Dao. It may not be Dao yet. Now Dao, again, is a universal rule. Okay, so that rule, you cannot be too specifically defined, because once you do, that's not a universal rule anymore. That could really reduce you down to the technique level. Okay, so I don't know if that make any sense, because I met a lot of Chinese, from China. They could not really understand, comprehend. What does that mean? That universal rules cannot be specifically defined. Once they are defined, they're no longer the universal rule. Now, does it make any sense? I will give you some example, yeah? When you are talking about specifically, let's say, Chinese Kung Fu, but not just Kung Fu, something I mentioned earlier that I got a little training, but I have to, make it clear here. I am no Kung Fu man, okay? I'm not going to claim or, present myself as a Kung Fu man. I'm not. But anyway, I had a little, I guess, entry training on the Tai Chi 13剑, okay? The 13 moves of the Tai Chi sword. That's what I didn't even get to the 13 move. So anyway, so if you try to, okay, of course there are rules here, right? But if you try to put this at the Dao level, you're gonna have problem because what you learn or you're trained with were the specific movements, right? So what I learned was Tai Chi 13 movements of the Tai Chi sword, the Chinese word, totally different from the Japanese word. Okay, different concept, different rule, different movements. But anyway, that Tai Chi 13 movement of sword, Chinese word, was extended from Tai Chi boxing. Okay, so when you talk about Tai Chi boxing, almost everybody knows because you see them in I'm not even gonna try to do it because I was not trained, but you do this in the Chinese parks, all those I guess the retired senior citizens, they do that, practice. It looks good, but it's not for the look. They do it, based for exercise in the morning, every morning, routinely. I don't know if you know. That's actually the toughest Chinese Kung Fu there is. That thing could be, if you do it right, you apply it right, that thing is most lethal weapon without the weapon, but, just the bare hands. You can kill a bunch of people easily within a few seconds. Okay? I don't know if you know that, but that's where the Tao comes in. You have the techniques, right? You learned. But I guess 99 out of 100, you're just doing, I won't call it, I won't dismiss that as a BS, but the way most people you learn, you don't use that as a defense, of yourself. You don't know how to use that. But if you have learned a whole bunch of other Kung Fu, all the different, specific ones, and then you kind of figure it out on your own. Nobody can teach you this. Okay, and then all that movements, it's all about how do you use them specifically against what. Okay, and then if this is the music, basically you speed up on the tempo, you do it really fast, right? But you don't just do it for show. You use it specific against a certain move against you. And how do you use all that, movement that you learned, right? Like in my case, that 13 movements or 13 moves of the Chinese sword, okay, of Tai Chi. I learned the movement, but how do I use them? When and how and by how much, right? That is the wisdom. That is not, oh, I'm smart, I pick up the movements, I know how to move them, but exactly how to use them to this, this specific purpose, right? So once again, I'm not a Kung Fu man, but this is just for analogy. In a traditional, Chinese or Chinaman, okay, if I want to defend myself, typically I won't make the first move against the other side, basically threatening me, in a very, I guess, obvious way that was gonna either hurt me or even kill me. I would not make the first move. Why? Because I would do this, basically give the gesture and show the other side says, I'm ready. You can make your move now. And the other side would actually, if that's another, old Chinese or Chinaman, probably won't just come in right away either, because both are thinking, hey, I'm trying to find out where's your weakness and I will attack on your weakness. Excuse me, that's one. And two, if you know or you don't know for sure that the other side actually is, not as good as you are, you don't know that, but you don't know if the other side is actually better than you need to make assessment. You need to identify the risk. And then you need to, develop your strategy. If this guy is good at this, or, a little not so much good at the other, then what I want to do, my strategy that I form right away is basically to attack there, right? And to avoid this, because this is probably where I'm a little weak. So basically, you're observing it's kind of like a radar scanning, right? You scan, you scan, you scan, and then you try to find what's the weakness on the other side. So both sides just started walking around, walking around. It's like, oh, like we're just taking a walk in the park. Not really. We're trying to, basically observe and, locate and define the weakness of the other side. So let's say I'm older. I'm more experienced in a little more number of fights, compared to the other side. I don't move, I don't make the first move against the other guy. I'm still walking, okay? Walking. Well, but I'm very careful because when I walk, the other side could tell the way I walk, what kind of training, what kind of kung fu, at what level I'm already arriving at. So while I'm walking, I don't show my cards. I try to basically conceal everything. And in my face will be a poker face. You can't read because I won't let you read me. But the other side is doing exactly the same. But finally, one side made the first move, right? Throw a punch at you. Of course, the Chinese don't do the punch, but I'm just using it as an analogy, right? So what happens now? If the other guy totally knows nothing about Chinese Kung Fu, now I know a little bit, what I'll do, I will basically, step aside a little bit. My feet still, basically on the same position, but with, basically my body, basically kind of slanted to the side a little bit to do what? So when this guy, his motion engineered or geared towards me, come, basically just pass me by. And this motion is coming in this direction. What do? I don't have to be a big guy. I don't have to be a mighty big fella. All I need to do just slightly push this guy because remember his motion is going this way. All I have to do is just basically very light touch. The guy is going to be pushed to the side. Do I just want to stop here? No, that's my right hand side. My left hand side, if it's trained, a big blow, right, to him. So you put him to the floor, right? That's the advantage, not to make the first move because you want to wait for his move, and then you can basically use the force he engineered, against you. You use that force. If you throw a punch, like this, you have to have a lot more strength. But when you do this, when he's passing you by, all that big force, you use it against himself. That's Taoism at work. Okay? So it's not about, your movement this, your movement that. When you are doing that, you don't even remember which movement, number what. You don't. That's the wisdom. Okay? So that is Tao. Can you specify, do this and that? If you can, you cannot really do it, on the spot. This is just like, remember that movie, which was based on the real event? This commercial airline pilot, landed his big jumbo jet on the Hudson River in New York, Manhattan, right? Was that anything of his training specifically? No. So was that, so what was that? You ask himself, ask anybody else, nobody can really tell you. But it's just something, he did it. So in that situation I just described, it's also, I just did it. You want to analyze this with AI, yeah, maybe you get somewhere, but the thing is, the wisdom is how do you use this knowledge you acquired just about anywhere, okay? As simple as plain it is, you cannot really describe, I did this because I see this and see that, so next time I'll do the same thing. Well, next time, is it going to be the exact same situation? No. So if you describe it very specifically, next time you're going to fail. I hope that explained. It's not a good analogy, but that's something I can think of right now, basically to explain why the universal rules cannot be specifically describe, because once you do, it's no longer the universal rule, because it has to be, put it this way, vague enough to fit for everything. Once it's very particular, it's not gonna, it will be a perfect fit here, but it won't fit anywhere else, right? That makes sense. So that is that. And oops, we're already 25 minutes. So I guess I'll end this session now, right here. See you next session.